Have you tried no-line stenciling with embossing folders? In this video, I show you how. Hello there, Michelle Short here with Terrific Tags with Michelle. Today I'm creating a tag with no-line stenciling using an embossing folder. So let's get started. This is the Mistletoe Wreath bundle that I'll be using today. So there's a beautiful stamp set there, a coordinating die set that cuts out the wreath and also a sentiment label, the 3D embossing folder, and then also simple colouring stencils which coordinate with the embossing folder and also this stamp set. So you can use these in lots of different ways, but I thought I would do some no-line stenciling today. So I have die cut out the wreath from Classic Crest 110 Solar White cardstock, and I'm lining that up inside of the 3D embossing folder. Now there are different ways that you could do this in different stages. I thought it'd be easier to cut the wreath first and then emboss it and then add the colouring on top. But you could definitely do it in a different order if you wanted to. I'm taking some little pieces of low tack tape and I'm holding the wreath in place so that when I run that through my die cutting machine it doesn't shift. It's pretty easy to line up once you've die cut that wreath. And then I can run that through my die cutting machine like I said and pop that out the other side. Just removing that low tack tape. And already you can see the really lovely embossed image on that die cut there. It's a really pretty, in actual fact I think it looks really lovely as is, but I do want to add some colour on top. So I've added it to a sticky mat that's going to help me keep it in place while I'm adding the stenciling on top. So I have this layering guide here that comes with the stencil set, and it explains in which order you can add the stencils on top, and I did do it in the order that it says, and it is really helpful, and I'll explain that in a little while I do it. So I'm just lining up the first stencil here, and it does take a little while just to kind of figure out exactly where it's going to go. Once you've done one, all of the rest line up really easily. Because you've got that embossing on it, it kind of pops in a bit like a puzzle piece, and so although there's no lines, it is quite easy to line up. So I'm starting off by adding the colour to the berries, and I'm using Coral Berry Crisp Dye ink to start with. This is kind of like a lighter shade of red from the Red Cosmos set, and I'm using an ink blending brush for that. And I want to add it fairly light because I want to add like 2 shades of red. So this first one here is going to end up looking like pink, which is what I wanted, and then the next one is going to kind of look like red, which is nice to have that contrast. This is a mistletoe wreath, so ordinarily the berries would actually be white, and when I made my card for the release I did actually create them in like a really light blue colour, which kind of looked a bit like white, but for this one I wanted to go with reds and pinks because I thought it was quite pretty. And this is card making, so you can use whatever colours you want. So next I'm lining up the next one, and when you line this stencil up over the top there is some indentations of where the other berries actually are underneath, so that's really helpful, and that's kind of really helpful to do it in the way that Altenew say to do it on the packaging, because actually it lines up really nicely on top of each other because you can see those indentations and you can see the ink blending underneath. So I used the ruby red for that layer, and then for the branch sort of in the middle I'm going in with mocha. You could do this branch actually kind of like a vine and actually do it green, and I think that that looks really nice as well, but for this one I wanted to create more of like a wintry vibe, and so I thought it would look quite nice with a brown branch, red berries and green leaves. So this is the first layer of the leaves here, and I'm going in with Forest Glades. This is more of kind of like an olive green. And I'm trying to focus most of the colour on the inside of the leaf, so where it kind of meets that branch, just to add a little bit of contrast onto the colouring. For the next layer, I'm using Grass Field, which is much more of a kind of grassy bright green. I really love the colour kind of difference between all of the different greens that I've used on the leaves. The next one is Sweet Leaf, and that's much more of a kind of minty green, and I think they all work really nicely together. But I definitely think you could use loads of different colour combinations here. You could do like aquas. It obviously maybe depended on the colour of the berries, but you could do like greys or anything like that. I think all of these kind of colour combinations would work really nicely on this wreath. You could do something completely different if you wanted to. So the best part of any stenciling is removing the stencil so that you can see what you've done underneath. And I really love the look of that embossing and the no line stenciling. Adding the ink on top of the embossing didn't really push it down very much, but if you did find that, you could always pop that back in the embossing folder and run that back through your die cutting machine, and that would just emphasize that embossing. So I have die cut 2 more of the wreath die, and I'm just layering them on top of each other. That's just going to give me a bit of dimension to the wreath, but also it's going to cover that embossing on the back of the piece. I've then die cut 2 terrific tag dies from Classic Crest 110 solar white cardstock, and I'm running one through my die cutting machine with the Deck Planks 3D embossing folder. This is my go-to embossing folder just to add some subtle interest onto the back of a card or tag in this instance. And what I love is that you can use the front or the back, so it's always helpful when you can get like 2 for 1 out of an embossing folder. I'm then taking that other tag, adding some glue tape onto that, and then I'm going to adhere them back to back. That's so that I'm kind of covering that embossing on the back of the tag. If I wanted to write a personal message on there, it's a lot nicer to do so not on embossing. I'm then bringing in the wreath here so that I can see where I want it to be adhered before I stick that down with some liquid glue. Obviously the tag is quite a bit smaller than the wreath, but I really love the look of the wreath kind of hanging outside of the tag. I thought it was quite pretty, and I thought it would work quite nicely to add to a gift. But you could definitely add that to a card base as well. I have stamped and heat embossed a sentiment onto black cardstock from the Mistletoe Wreath stamp set, and then I've cut that into a strip, and I've added some instant dimension foam tape onto the back, just on the left hand side because the right hand side is going to overlap that wreath, so I can add some glue tape onto that side, and then that's going to be flat against that wreath. To embellish, I'm adding some cherry blossom enamel dots. I wanted to add a little bit more of the pink colour in, so just adding 3 around that sentiment strip. And then at this point I thought I actually wanted a little bit more colour onto the tag, but I didn't really want to change anything drastically. So I'm taking the Red Cosmos Gradient cardstock set, and I'm just figuring out here which colour I want. And I decided to go for the lightest, which is Frosty Pink. And I'm going to die cut another 2 tags from that. I'm going to adhere them again back to back. That is really just because when you're doing die cutting, it leaves that really nice kind of rounded edge, and on the back is not always as pretty. So I quite like to just add them back to back so that I can kind of have it so that it's kind of peeking through the side of the tag at the front, but then at the back you'll still see it as well. But I don't want to actually stick it down, so I'm going to adhere them together with some twine. So I'm just popping that through the top of the tag and then tying that in a bow at the front. I'm just fiddling with the bow a little bit, getting those kind of strands as best as I want them to be, and then I can cut those down, and then that tag is kind of just going to sit behind, and you can kind of move it kind of where you wanted to, really. I just think it adds a little extra pop of colour. I could write a personal message on the back of the pink tag, or I could actually write it on the back of the white one, and it's kind of going to be hidden underneath, which I think is quite a nice little feature. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar on YouTube and also over on the Altenew blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Hello crafters, Jen here. For more tips, techniques, tutorials, and to discover which paper crafting products are right for you, subscribe to Altenew's YouTube channel. Make sure to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Thanks for watching.